As a middle schooler, I found myself very scared. Scared that the world was going to end because my peers and I were using plastic straws, or because my family used plastic bags when grocery shopping. I was haunted by the knowledge that my family's car was practically dumping CO2 into the atmosphere, and even more haunted that no one seemed to care enough to do anything. I couldn't just sit by and watch my planet, our planet, fall to the hands of humans in their gas vehicles. So, I jumped into action. I bought metal straws and canvas shopping bags that my family reluctantly began to use. I started attending local beach cleanups and local conservation related events. I started making sure everything I consumed was reusable or recyclable in some way. I even used my minimal TikTok platform to encourage viewers to reduce their carbon emissions. It wasn't until high school that I realized a monumental error in my ways. I was in a debate with someone about these issues, and they told me something that shook me to my core, something that I genuinely refused to believe at the time. The term carbon footprint was coined by Big Oil. It was then that I began to realize that I had fallen for their trap. If I blame myself and the actions of those around me for climate change, I am too distracted to notice what should have been clear to me from the beginning. It is the action of large corporations that harm the environment in the most significant ways, and the alterations of an individual's lifestyle will not save the human race from going extinct due to climate change. Many still debate whether or not climate change even exists, as if the increased severity of natural disasters and record temperatures year after year wasn't enough proof. However, the refutation of climate change is simply a refutation of science and a denial of fact. There is abundant research showing that atmospheric carbon dioxide is higher than it has been in millennia, that the sea level has risen 8 inches in the last century, and that ice sheets are shrinking at rates higher than 100 billion tons per year. The scientific community is in consensus that climate change is manifesting in large-scale catastrophic events and that the carbon emissions of the human race are causing it. You may have heard the term carbon footprint thrown around when discussing one's personal use of fossil fuels, or perhaps when referring to a company's emissions. But where did this term come from, and why is it so controversial? The 1990s were not a good decade for the oil industry. The Gulf War oil spill and the Fergana Valley oil spill, among others, were at the forefront of people's minds, and oil companies were losing trust from the public as the environmental movement strengthened, and many were starting to realize the scale of the environmental harm these corporations caused. The oil industry needed to do something, and they needed to do it fast. British Petroleum, having one of the largest market shares in the industry, was quick to act, and in 2000 rebranded itself to be called Beyond Petroleum, an initiative that revolved around renewable energy and environmental awareness. You may be wondering, what does any of this have to do with the term carbon footprint? Well, in 2004, to the shock of no one, the rebrand wasn't doing too well, and trust in the oil industry was still degrading. As a result, BP unveiled their very own carbon footprint calculator, designed so that you, the consumer, can see how much carbon you are emitting into our atmosphere instead of worrying about how much oil BP is dumping into the ocean, or the 32.1 million tons of carbon they emit annually. For reference, the average American emits 16 tons annually. That means that yearly BP CO2 emissions are equivalent to that of 20 million Americans. That's approximately the population of Florida. Despite all this calculator was a huge success, with almost 300,000 people using it in the first year alone. However, despite all of these attempts to secure a spot as an environmentally conscious corporation, in 2010, BP's oil rig, Deepwater Horizon, exploded and sank off the coast of Louisiana, causing the largest marine oil spill in history. This is one of the most successful examples of a deceptive marketing tactic known as greenwashing, which the United Nations defines as promoting false solutions to the climate crisis that distract from the delay of concrete and credible action. In other words, it's corporations leading you to believe that you are the problem in the climate crisis, even though 71% of emissions worldwide are from only 100 companies. Greenwashing is nothing new either. In 1970, plastic container manufacturers Coca-Cola and PepsiCo paid Iron Eyes Cody to cry about a man littering, suggesting that individual waste was going to lead to our planet's demise. In the 90s, Chevron launched an ad campaign called People Do, which showed how workers cared for an endangered species living near an oil refinery. I'll let the irony speak for itself on that one. Even today, fast fashion brands put eco-friendly labels on their clothes with no rhyme or reason. Amazon lets you deliver an item slower, which makes taking the same item the same distance but a day or two later somehow better for the environment. And car companies like Volkswagen, who claim to have net zero goals, cheat on their emissions tests. This distrust in the corporate world's cleanliness is echoed in literature. In her poem Tradition, Juliana Spar laments her anger over the inescapability of these corporations as she passes the chemicals that pollute her body to her child, who will sing a song of rebuke towards these companies. Spar names 13 companies in her poem, including 3M, Daikin, and Chevron, among others, which are all companies that claim to have net zero goals, but have very little elaboration on how they plan to achieve this, nor what they define the term net zero to mean. These are two common greenwashing tactics outlined by the United Nations. So next time you feel bad for using a plastic grocery bag, or throwing away a single-use plastic container, or feel like your efforts to combat climate change are for nothing, know that your efforts do mean nothing in the grand scheme of things, unless the corporations that emit in a day what you emit in a lifetime actually start taking their net zero initiatives seriously.